Aloha! Today we will be going over crafting in this 101 class video. If you have any questions or tips about crafting, go ahead and throw it in the comments section of this video, and we will try to answer as quickly as possible. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The first and biggest thing about crafting in ESO is that it really is no big mystery or complicated or anything. And once you get the hang of it, it is really quite one of the easiest things about the game. First of all, there are 7 different kinds of crafting in this game. Blacksmithing, clothing, woodworking, jewelry crafting, alchemy, enchanting, and provisioning. In this video, we'll be going over the 4 main equipment crafting skills: blacksmithing, clothing, woodworking, and jewelry crafting. I'll cover the other 3 in a separate video. Today, we'll just be covering equipment. The first thing you will notice when you go to the crafting station you will see 6 options: refine, creation, deconstruct, improvement, research, and depending on the station, either patterns, blueprints, etc. That last option is always for furnishing crafting, and that's another show. The first option, refine, is you explore the world and you will find plants, logs, and stone nodes that you can mine and collect raw materials from. Those raw materials must be refined before you can use them, and that's where this option comes in. You need 10 of any raw material type to refine it, and you will always get back around 7 or 8 or so refined materials. Sometimes, depending on your crafting skill, you may get other materials from refining materials. Like, I have some raw jute here. I'm going to refine some of that. Hey, I got 10. The second option, creation, this is where you do your actual crafting. Now, before we look at this, let's take a look at your crafting skills. Your crafting skills, go into your skills menu and scroll all the way to the bottom. When you unlock your crafting skills, this is where you will find them. Here, I'll be using clothing as an example. The other skills are more or less the same. The first passive ability here is what will determine the highest level of item you can craft. Here it's tailoring. For example, in order to craft CP-160 gear, you must have 10 out of 10 fully invested in this passive. You will always have the first point for free. In order to increase it, you must level your craft skill to the required level, and then invest a skill point into it. Looks like being at level 6 with his character, I can invest a point into that. Let's go ahead and do that. And now you'll see that the next upgrade will be unlocked at rank 10. The second passive here, Keen Eye. Some crafts have this, some do not. This passive is merely for making the material nodes found out in the wild easier to see, because they can be pretty difficult to find. These just make them. It just makes it light up like a light bulb. The first passive, the third passive, is the hireling. Again, some crafts will have this, some don't. This passive gives you a hireling who sends you a mail every day with some crafting materials for that specific craft. It is a good passive to have if the craft has it. The fourth passive, this is differently named depending on the craft, but it is essentially the same. For instance, in the third passive for jewelry crafting, is the third passive for jewelry crafting. This passive is essentially extraction, in that it increases the chances of extracting improvement materials and other things from refining raw materials. The next passive, here it's stitching, but it's more or less the same for all crafts. This reduces the amount of time it takes to research any item trait. We'll get into that part in a bit. And finally, the last passive. Here it's Tannin Expertise. Might be named differently in other crafts. But this just increases the chances of improving items, and also reduces the number of improvement materials needed to improve one item. We will also get into this in a bit. Now let's go back to creation at the crafting station. So here there are 4 options to select from. Only the first 3 are necessarily required and must be selected to craft the item. The last one could be left blank, but that's not recommended. I will get into why in a bit. The first is the type of item you wish to craft. So, see, I could craft a robe, a shirt, shoes, gloves, hat, breeches, etc. And the second is the type of material, which determines the level range. Like jute here, can range from levels 1 to 14. One important note, other than level 1, items can only be crafted in even levels. So, first I would select the type, and then use this to select the level. The third is the style. In order to craft in a certain style, you must have learned that style from items called motifs, which are good for a lot more besides just crafting, but that's another show. You also need the style material to craft in that style, such as Khajiit requires moonstones in order to craft that. Only one of any style material is ever needed. And you always know the style for your particular race. So if you are a Breton, like I am, you always know how to craft Breton. The last and optional step is the trait. There are 9 traits in the game, for each armor, and for each type of armor, weapons, and jewelry. In order to craft an item of any singular trait, you must have completed 2 requirements. First, you must have researched that trait for that piece of gear. And second, you must have 1 trait gem of the specified type for that trait, such as sapphire for divines. As you can see here, Kwoi's research is terribly lacking. So, let's create a robe. First, I would select the robe in the first option at the top. Then, I would select the item level and material. Let's make this level 14. And then, I would select third, I will select the style I want it to be. Let's make this Breton, because that's the only style she knows. And lastly, I would select a trait, normally Divines, but as you can see, she's a little lacking. So, then, I just press the square button. And the item is crafted. So now I've crafted my robe. But I don't want it anymore. So instead of deleting it or selling it, I think I'm going to deconstruct it. That's where the third option comes in. Deconstruct. Now this serves two purposes. First, it will help level the crafting skill, which is important. And pro tip, if you deconstruct items crafted by another player, which will you can tell because it will always say crafted by this character at the bottom of the item tooltip, then your skill will level faster. You will get more inspiration, which is the type of XP for crafting. The second purpose of this is it will usually get back some materials used in creating it. So let's deconstruct this robe. First I'll press X and then square to deconstruct it. Hey, I got an achievement. And I got 6 jute back. The fourth option, improvement. Now, let's create another item to show you how to improve an item. Now I have created another item that I want to improve. Now, in order to improve an item, you must have at least one of the required improvement material, such as hemming, if I want to make this item green. But I highly recommend always using the highest number possible at all times. The reason for this being that depending on the number of improvement materials used in improving this item, the higher the chance that the improvement process will succeed. And if you have it at 100%, then it will always succeed. But if you use less, like 4 for 80%, 3 for 60%, or even down to 1 for 20%, and hence a lower chance of success, and if it fails, the item will be destroyed. Imagine if that were a Maelstrom Inferno Staff. You'd be a very sad person indeed. Let's improve this robe to green. Now, lastly, research. Now, as I mentioned before, there are 9 traits for each of armor, weapons, and jewelry. In order to create an item of any trait, you must research that trait in that particular type of item. So if I want to create a robe in Divines, I must have researched the Divines trait in robes. In order to do this, you must first find or obtain that item with the trait you want to research. Let's see if I can go find one.
Come.
Okay, I have obtained my item to research. And once you have obtained your item for research, you need to come to a crafting station, come to this option, research. Scroll through until you find the item you want to research the trade on. And then scroll down. It should say researchable next to the item, if you already have an item with that trait. And once you select the item, it will give you a warning that once you go through with researching this item, the item will be destroyed. Select yes to continue. It will then take a certain amount of time to finish researching, depending on how many traits you already have researched for that item type. For the staff, it will take 5 hours and 24 minutes, roughly. Now, trait research is very important for another reason. Set crafting. All over Tamriel, there are crafting stations out in the wild. If I can not run into stuff that you can find. And each one will also give you the option of crafting a different crafted set. Outside of the island here, we happen to have one. But in order to craft an item of any set, you must have researched a certain number of traits, ranging from 2 to 9 in that item type. So if I wanted to craft a robe of Julianos, I would have had to researched 6 traits in robes. Or if I want to craft an item at this station, which is right here, or Torg's Pact, let's see, I would have to research 3 items. 3 traits. As you can see, I don't have any. Now, when you come to a set crafting station, it will normally default to the set apparel. You can use the L1 and R1 to switch between the two. Make sure that when you're crafting the item, that it is set to set apparel. Otherwise, you'll be a very sad person. And that's about all there is to crafting, at least for equipment. Consumables such as alchemy and enchanting is a whole other subject, but that's in the show. And furnishing crafting, as I alluded to earlier, basically goes into its own subsystem, which I will also go over in another video. I hope this video helps someone out there who might be stuck with crafting. If you have any questions about this or anything else, feel free to drop those down in the comments section of this video, And do hit the subscribe button so you know when we have published another video. You can also check us out at www.loa-ps4.com. Until next time, happy gaming.